Hello, hello, hello. Happy Friday, family. It's Nathalie Nelson Parker and the girls here, and we are back. It was so nice. We had to do it twice.
Come on, do it twice.
We did it twice. We are back, and I'm super excited tonight because, like last week, of course, we're talking about issues that are pertinent to this time, particularly with regards to Black Lives Matter and really the voice of justice that is louder right now than any other time I believe it's been in history. And you guys could correct me if this is wrong, but is this not the largest civil rights movement of our time?
That's what sources have been saying, not just of our time, but I think in history, right? Because it's an international uprising, if you will, right? That's in that's taken root in several countries because they can all relate to the global dominance of white supremacy, right? So I think you're right. That's what I've read, at least.
Yeah, and then this is so unique in that it's happening globally. And so for just 2 weeks of protesting to see corporations, organizations, even the NFL have to address issues of racism and bias and publicly speak out about it, I think that says something about how this has the potential to not only make a difference, but to really shift things in the grand scheme of things. So I love that as my girlfriends, we can have this conversation with the greater public. And what we really want to talk about is implicit bias. But before we do that, we have a very special person on the line with us tonight who wasn't with us last week, Miss Aisha Thomas. So Aisha, go ahead. Say who you are, tell us about yourself. What do you do? How did you get here? All of those good things.
Okay, so what's up, guys? I'm Aisha Thomas. You guys would probably have seen me with Nathalie before, but speaking about things, because I really work in the leadership and team development space, I'm also a proud Air Force member of the United States Air Force. And also I have, this experience is going to be very interesting because I'm West African. So I also have that aspect where we are actually, my sisters are going to be the first generation having to have these conversations with our children, because back home we didn't have these type of things to talk about. So my experience is I'm learning with a lot of other people. Me coming to America, it's like a lot of things that I'm learning. So it's a different foresight for me or experience for me because I come from another country and I'm like, oh, this is our first generation having to have this conversation with our children. So yeah, it's a very unique. You're muted.
Sound.
Okay, so we're the two generations representing different countries, Jamaica and West Africa.
Yes.
The beauty of diversity. All right, guys, welcome to the conversation. We're talking about decoding implicit bias. So go ahead right now, like, share, comment. We want to hear your voices as you participate in this conversation. And we're going to start with Amber, because you posted something, Amber, that I think really talks about the conversation that we're having on so many different levels, right? Not just in terms of Black Lives Matter versus white supremacy, but even implicit bias that shows up cross-culturally. And it's important for organizations and individuals to recognize that, because we can't say Black Lives Matter and only hold white people accountable to that, right? We need to hold other communities to live into what it means to really be equitable and just. So you posted this. So I'm gonna put up the pictures and I want you to kind of walk us through it and frame the conversation that we're having. So this is the first picture that was up. So tell us what we're looking at.
Yeah, so basically this is a Google image search. Whenever you search something such as beauty, certain images are yielded, right? Whenever you search something such as professional hairstyles or professionalism, certain images are yielded, right? And so there are a couple of scholars who have done work on our topic, right, which is decoding implicit bias, racism and how that shows up in algorithms, how it shows up in on the internet, right? So basically, coders, the assumption is that the internet, is free from bias, right? The internet is just, it's just a mechanism for us to find information, and that it is not influenced by human bias. That's wrong, because humans actually code the algorithms, right, that produce certain results, or code the algorithm. Yeah, I said it right. I said it correctly. So what we see here is whoever coded beauty, for example, had a certain idea in mind when he or she thought about beauty. Therefore, whenever we see these results, it's the result of someone having a certain idea of what beauty is. And historically, that has been a Eurocentric idea of beauty, right? Whenever we look at professional hairstyles, in non-professional hairstyles, you'll see someone with locks, or
so this is
this
is the unprofessional hairstyle.
Yeah, you see natural hair. You see Black women wearing their hair the way they grow from their scalp, right? And so whenever you Google professional hairstyles, it's white women or white men, right, with straight hair. And again, that goes into there we go. And they're quite handsome. But why is this professional? And then someone else's locks and natural hair is not professional. So again, a couple of scholars have done work on this. The first book of its kind that really digs into this is titled Algorithms of Oppression by Sophia Noble, right? And so what she did was, I think she was at a conference, and a friend of hers who I actually know, his name is Andre Brock. Andre told her, this is back in 2000, like the late 2000s, right? Early 2010s. He told her, he said, you should Google Black girls and see what comes up. And so when she Googled Black girls, pornographic images were yielded, right?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Pornographic images, Black girls in less than desirable situations, right? Whenever you Google ugly, Black girls will come up. Whenever you Google Asian girls, she goes into Googling Asian girls. Pornography comes up. And so in a section of her book, she talks about the pornification of Black bodies and the history of the pornification of Black bodies, right? And so those of us who, something about Black history and American history, Sandra Bartman comes to mind, right? The Hottentot images of the woman, with the big posterior and big breasts, and she was, caged and used as in an exhibition for the white male gaze, right? And that influenced all types of media depictions about who Black women are, what we look like, and the idea that we're hypersexualized, right? So implicit bias, doesn't just show up in police departments. It doesn't just show up, in our curriculums and in education. It doesn't just show up, on the job. It shows up in our, in the internet, the thing that we use to gather information. And the implication of that is, if I'm using the internet to find information, my information is going to be colored by someone else's bias. Right? My information is going to be skewed because someone else's lens sees me or sees Asians or sees, someone who's not white a certain way. There's another scholar named Ruha Benjamin. She has a book called Race After Technology, and she calls it the new Jim Code, right? Like the new Jim Crow. And it's another way to further perpetuate racism and oppression for Black people through coded ways on the internet. So I shared those images, Nathalie, because it really speaks to the vast way that we are all fighting white supremacy. Again, it's not just in police departments. It's not just in schools, the healthcare system or on the job or, different systems of power, right? It's in the very thing that we use every single day.
Yeah.
And that's the internet. So we have to challenge Google. We have to challenge search engines to ensure that they're hiring people who do not exhibit these implicit biases, right? They're hiring people, and also Facebook. Facebook is also a culprit of this same thing as well, right? Showing certain images, or buying into the idea that certain images, or that certain persons, right? What's the word I'm looking for? That certain persons, you know, that their beauty, you know, or whatever, right,
Mm-hmm.
is indicative of their blackness or their whiteness.
Yeah. And I think that really speaks to the insidious nature of racism.
For sure.
That it's not just a situation, like you said before, about George Floyd and police brutality, and not saying that that was not a situation that was, you know, so explosive that it literally set off this movement that we see today. But there are underlying factors that need to be addressed on so many different levels, that, you know, even in the way that we are Googling. So if we say do your homework, 9 times out of 10, that means people are going to get to what?
Yeah, they're going to be on Google. And you have to make sure that, you know, that you even filter out what you find, you know. And I use Google, right? But that's not my first, you know, my first approach when I'm doing my homework. You know, we're scholars, right? So everyone doesn't have access to JSTOR or LexisNexis or, you know, all those different online tools, right? So the average everyday person has to know that although Google is free and it's helpful, Google is also extremely skewed, because those who have those good paying jobs, you know, that this is why Black Girls Code is so important, to counter what we see every day, because someone for a long time has occupied those spaces in, for example, Silicon Valley, have gotten paid the salaries to influence how we think about certain people. And when we see them, whenever we approach a Black person or Asian person or whatever, we have that in the back of our minds because that's the image that was put forth, right? So yeah, check Google, you know. be aware that Google is not, again, it's not neutral. Nothing is neutral.
Nothing is neutral, because
even artificial intelligence, it's not neutral.
Yes, you're talking good. If you like that, go ahead, like, share, comment, put 1 in the comment section and say, Amber, you are talking good, girl. you did your homework.
Listen.
Amber came with books.
Yeah. Well, I had to read these for a class this semester, and it's just so crazy how people, again, the average everyday person who's not in these classrooms in the ivory towers, right? How they're also seeing this stuff and saying, hey, you know, I may not have the language to articulate it, you know, a certain way, or I may, right? But we're all having these same conversations, and they're not exclusive to just scholars. You know, everyone sees this, you know, and because everyone sees it, everyone has the power to put pressure on Google, on Yahoo, on Bing, right? On all these search engines to ensure that whoever you hire, again, to code certain keywords a certain way. I learned how to code when I was in high school, you know, when coding was like a big, like the big thing, you know. It was in high school for me, and I wish I had continued on with it as like a side hustle, you know, because it's very lucrative. Very lucrative.
And I think that speaks to something, Kara, you and I have talked about in regards to the difference between representation, meaning having African American or diversity in certain places, and being inclusive, right? Having spaces that are inclusive. Because if you are a person of privilege, whatever color you are, if you are a Caucasian person, your experience centers you.
Yeah.
Pretty much in every area that you are, unless, like you discussed last week, Kara, you challenge your privilege and put yourself in places where you are immersed, and not just surrounded, but immersed in African American and marginalized community experiences and context and culture. And so there was something that we talked about before, Karen. I want you to talk about the situation as transparent, as in detailed or not as you want. about white gaze, right? So white gaze is, to me, and this is my definition, the difference between sympathy and empathy. It's the difference in really understanding other experiences and cultures, and becoming an ally, as opposed to really having relationship with and walking alongside. So can you share about the experience that we kind of had together with that?
Yeah, sure. And are you going to show the Toni Morrison thing?
Yeah. Would you want me to do it now, or?
Well, let me just say where I've worked in publishing for 20 years, but I think where white gaze came into my consciousness was hearing Toni Morrison in her documentary talking about she wanted to write, like, I think she even physically, like, she wanted the white man off her shoulder. She didn't want him sitting there looking at what she was writing. And so then when I went back to read more of her novels, and I was like, I didn't know a lot of the references she was making.
Yeah.
I didn't understand what she was talking about in the culture she was describing. And that was her point.
Yeah.
I'm not going to take the time.
Whiteness.
Yes. I'm not going to take the time to write this narrative so that white people can understand it. That's not who I'm writing for. And so that, and then I have to go do my work. I have to ask friends, like, what is this about? Even reading fiction. And so that's where it first came into my consciousness, really. So now I work for a publishing company, and I'm supposed to read all of our manuscripts before they go to print. And so I got a manuscript, and I thought, for us in the publishing world, we talk about audience, and this author, I think, would say her audience was a global, diverse audience. But reading it, there was some, we thank them. We are grateful for them. And some of the metaphors lacked a certain sensitivity for the audience she wanted to be writing with and for. And I've done enough work that it triggered something in me that I was like, I don't think I know enough to know if this is going to be, I'm Wesleyan, so I talk about doing no harm. So I'm like, I'm afraid this manuscript will do harm in the audience that we're hoping it will reach. And so I called Nathalie and said, if you have the time and energy, again, like we were talking about last week, if you have the time and energy, would you read through this and see if any of this lands wrong with you? What is missing? And she did, and wrote back with some comments. And then I was able to talk to the editor, and we went back to the author and said, these are some things that don't sit well with us. Can you revisit these? And to her credit, she was like, I'm so embarrassed I didn't see this. And yes, let's make the edits. Let's make this right. And so, and I mean, it's easier to tell on myself. So I wrote this book in 2015 about passing on our faith to our children. And one of the weeks we talk about the fruits of the Spirit. And I'm encouraging parents to talk to their kids about gentleness and self-control and kindness. And about that time, my daughter was getting her driver's license. And Stephen Handy, a pastor here in town, who's a friend of mine, his son was getting his driver's license. And I mean, you know where I'm going. I wasn't having any conversations with my daughter except don't hit mailboxes. Because it
back out of closed garage doors.
Stephen do not crash.
Right.
Slow down.
But Stephen had to have very different conversations with his son. And so then when I reflect on gentleness and self-control, that fruit of the Spirit looks very different in what I'm teaching my children.
Yeah.
And what Stephen was teaching his children about self-control.
That's good.
You know, so it's like, I haven't, but I wanted to like find collaborators and rewrite this book, because look at the cover, y'all. It's right. Like it's performative.
Yeah. Well, we grow, we evolve.
Yes,
like the more we do our homework care, the more we evolve.
That's right. So I think I was writing a good Christian book for Christian families, and hopefully God is doing good things with it in the world. But yes, now that I've learned and experienced a little bit more of life, and had friends open my eyes, I'm like, I would have written this book totally differently now.
Yeah.
So that's what I think about of the white gaze and implicit bias. I wasn't trying to exclude anyone, but I sure as hell did.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But I love that you have the humility, the authenticity, and the willingness to say, I don't want to be this way. Mm-hmm. I feel like so many times we have our biases and that's it. We're not willing to learn, to grow, to walk alongside, to challenge our biases.
Because it's comfortable. We're comfortable in our biases.
And I think it speaks to the privilege that you talked about last week, right? We all have a sense of privilege, whether it's white, black, class, whatever it is, all of us have a sense of privilege, and we have to decenter. I really believe decentering whiteness decenters a lot of other forms of where we find those issues of power and injustice and prejudice and bias.
Because whiteness is an idea. It's not a group of people per se. It shows up in a group of people, but whiteness is an idea. Right. So it can definitely show up in black folks, or in Latinos, right? It can show up in anyone who wants that same type of power that whiteness pervades, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think this video, and I'm so glad that you shared it with us, really speaks to that. So I'm going to show that, and then I want to hear what you...
My grandfather bragged all the time that he had read the Bible, and it was illegal in his life to read. Ultimately, I knew that words have power.
I wanted as many people who could hear my voice to understand the importance of her work. Get people to trust that, oh, this is something safe, and then, bam, hit them with Toni Morrison.
One of them early reviews says she's got a great talent. One day she won't limit it to only writing about black people. Like, really, it's limiting for her to write about black people?
People began to buy Toni Morrison, and then we began to teach her, and as a consequence, they had to pay attention.
You'd sick unto death of being labeled a black writer.
I prefer it.
Oh, I thought you probably were tired of it.
Well, I'm tired of people asking the question.
Oh yes, of course.
I don't know where this woman's energy came from to raise two kids, to bring other people of color to the party, and also write these novels.
Toni was an editor at Random House.
Navigating a white male world was not threatening. It wasn't even interesting. I was more interesting than they were. And I wasn't afraid to show it.
Suddenly, the canon wasn't the private property of white male writers.
I've thrown this book across the room and then walked down the steps laughing. Like, you read Toni and you cry, but you gotta laugh.
Texas Bureau of Corrections banned Paradise because it might incite a riot. And I thought, how powerful is that?
When Toni Morrison published Beloved, it was an extraordinary turning point. We can never think about slavery in the same way.
A friend of mine called me up early in the morning and said, Toni, you won the Nobel Prize. And I remember holding the phone thinking, she must be drunk.
Toni Morrison's work shows us through pain all the myriad ways we can come to love. That is what she does, with some words on a page.
Man,
I love Toni Morrison.
Wow, that was amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we talked a little bit about intersectionality last week, and in the movie, she talks about it was time for everybody to get raises, and she didn't get the same raise as her white male colleagues. And
at the publishing house, right?
Yes, at Random House. And she was so brilliant. She said, this is not about race and this is not about my gender. I am the breadwinner in my family and you are the breadwinner in your family. So we get the same raise. And they gave it to her. I mean, you know,
that's that asset based equity we were talking about last week.
For sure.
Yeah. What was your response, Aisha?
I mean, like I said, I'm having this interesting experience, like listen to a lot of things because like I said, I come from this African experience. And even growing up, for me, I had an identity crisis because when I first came to the United States, I was in Virginia, I went to the school that was majority white. And the only thing that was awkward about it is because back home, the level of education was different. So when I came to the United States, I was about 3 grades higher. So me walking into the room was more representative of who's this little girl and coming into this room. So anyway, so I moved back a couple grades and then we ended up transitioning to Maryland and I went to the more, the Black school and I wasn't accepted, right? So it's interesting because I started to disconnect from my Africanness to be more Black American. So when I talk about my experiences, it's so new and I'm just learning so many things. This just happened literally a few years ago where I'm starting to really understand the depths of the Black American experience, the depths of really even reconnecting to my African culture, because just imagine being someone that's the same melanin color going into a space and she wasn't accepted by people who look like her and how I struggle with it. So I think I had to go through a season of accepting myself, who I was as an African woman, reconnecting with that. And then now I started to learn more and more about the Black American experience. So it's interesting. I'm watching this. I'm just like, I need to learn about this woman because again, my experience is so different. I am now having to talk to this is our first generation. Me and my sisters are having to have this conversation with our children about this Black American experience. Hey, if you get pulled over by a cop, this is what's going to happen because in my country, everyone looked like us. The cops looked like us. We held them accountable. I saw cops get shut down because they didn't do what they were supposed to do. So I'm literally living experiences that are so new to my family that it's just interesting going through this dynamic because I'm living in the Black American world as an African woman, if that makes sense.
That makes so much sense. And it ties into our discussion about how implicit bias shows up cross-culturally, cross-racially, interracially. And I understand that because I always felt like, even though I am American, I'm first generation American. So I always felt Jamaican first, if that makes sense. And so there's this code switching that happens that when I'm with my family, I'm like super Jamaican, wagwan, patois, Jamaican food, all of that. And then when I am, in other spaces, I am proper and, you have to code switch. And it speaks a lot to how we have biased about what is acceptable, what is appropriate, and as Amber showed us earlier through those screenshots, what we deem as professional versus unprofessional. And I love that Toni Morrison was like, I know I'm a lot more interesting than you.
Exactly. Aisha, like the perfect place to start for like the Black American experience, in my opinion, because my whole background is literature, right? The perfect place to start is Toni Morrison. Seriously, because she really captures not just the Black American experience, but that experience through a woman's lens.
Yeah,
and that was missing. She's a womanist. That was missing greatly at the time. In African American literature, right? You had dominant voices like Richard Wright and James Baldwin and Ralph Ellison who dominated the narrative about the Black American experience. Then you have
the Black male experience.
Exactly. They're writing from a certain experience, right? Then you have, your Toni Morrison, your Zora Neale Hurston, your Octavia Butler, who are saying, okay, this is how race has affected us too. This is how the legacy of slavery has affected us too. When I was a kid, like y'all, no lie, my mom, when I was like in junior high, made me read Beloved. Beloved is an explicit book. Like, it's
Oh, we lost you. We lost you for a second, Amber.
Yeah.
Oh,
okay, there we go.
But my mom made me read that, and like you, Kara, you have one idea, you know, at one point in life, and then as you get older, your understanding grows. And I was just like, oh Lord, this is more than what I thought it was as a child reading. So Aisha, that's a great place to start. Seriously, it's Toni Morrison, Beloved, The Bluest Eye.
The Bluest Eye.
Bluest Eye. Bro, it's so good.
Okay.
Song of Solomon, Sula,
Home and Mercy are some of her new ones. Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
Her collection of essays that she published last year before she died, The Source of Self-Regard. Yes, I have that. Kara, I love you. It's so good. And that I think it's the introduction titled Peril.
Yes.
She perfectly captures the moment we are in right now in this country with Donald Trump, right? And this authoritarian, this resurgence, right, of authoritarianism in our democracy. She is, I want to say is, although she has passed, she is a genius. So start with her, Aisha. You will be immensely blessed.
yes, I appreciate that.
A wordsmith too, just says words in such ways that nobody else can. So
yeah. And I love The Bluest Eye. I can't remember if I read it in 8th grade or 9th grade. I can't remember if it was between middle school and high school. And what I loved about The Bluest Eye was, you know, she talked about kind of that experience of the two-ness, but she talked about it in the sense of the context of the conversation that we're having, of how that happens interracially, right? How we as African Americans see ourselves.
She had a white friend.
Through the blue eye, right? But also how we amongst ourselves through colorism want to ascribe to the blue eye.
Exactly.
And so that intentionality for her to write it that way and the intention of being in those experiences, I think captures again that insidious nature of bias. And so, you know, Aisha talked about the cops earlier. So I didn't tell you guys this last week. But when we were in Chicago, Leon and I got pulled over by the police. And right, Aisha, that's exactly how we felt when we saw the blue lights. Now, we got pulled over, but there were African-American cops. So it wasn't a situation where we were racially, you know, targeted or profiled. We were in Chicago. It was dark. We kind of went down the wrong street. It was a one-way. So we immediately pulled into the gas station. The police came in behind us, and the tension was so thick because it was the height of all of the riots. And Chicago was on a lockdown. Businesses were shut down. There was a lot of damage. So we felt the anxiety within ourselves, but come on, Rose.
Oh yeah.
As you leisurely sit on your crushed blue velvet couch. It was my friend. Cheers.
Yeah, come on, water.
So they pull us over. Leon and I are like in the car, like don't want to move, don't want to make bullets. Sweating bullets. I'm like so nervous.
And the baby in the back seat.
No, the baby's not with us, thank God.
Okay.
The baby wasn't with us. The baby was with family. So the police officers come and I can feel their energy and their anxiety because of the heightened experience of the violence, the looting. And one officer is calm or trying to be, and the other one is like really aggressive. So they ask for the routine, you know, license, registration, you turn down the one way. And then it's like, you could have killed somebody. Like it goes hype. So I'm like, Leon,
girl, calm down.
Yeah. I'm like, Leon, just, you know, they're anxious. They run our information. One officer says, we don't need your registration. You can put that away. Leon puts it away. The other officer says, give me your registration, sir. And Leon says, ma'am, he told me I could put it away. She gets agitated. I can hear over the intercom or whatever that they're speaking that they got the numbers wrong. So they couldn't recognize the registration. So I'm looking straight ahead. Within a split second, it went from who do we give the registration to 3 other cop cars pulling up in front of us.
No.
And
yeah.
And I'm sitting there thinking, I hope I make it home tonight.
Yeah.
Luckily, we prayed, and well, I was praying. I don't know what Leon was doing. He was really agitated.
Yeah.
But I'm praying that within this experience, that their anxiety and my anxiety doesn't make this more than it needs to be.
Yeah.
Right.
So he gives her the registration. She reads the number again over the intercom. And, they confirm everything's fine. We live out of state. We didn't see, there was no markers that said do not enter. Everything's fine. We drive home. On the drive home, all of the intersections or on the interstate that we need to get off are blocked off. So I'm living this experience. I'm from Tennessee. So the level of looting and everything in the neighborhood that I live in is not the same as it is in Chicago. And I'm thinking that narrative of they're burning down their own neighborhoods. It's like, bruh, I can't get out of my neighborhood. And how that felt to us to have to drive around and around and figure out how we can get to where we're trying to go. And so when we talk about implicit bias, I feel like even in that transaction, even though they were African-American officers, that there were so many layers to what was happening in that experience. And how through implicit bias, the type of interactions that we have are transactional, right? They're through the lens of power. They're through the lens of control. They're through the lens of subjugating others, as opposed to transformational. What would that experience have been like if that officer was trained and enlightened on different ways to interact with people and not coming to the car window with the expectation because we took a wrong turn that something was wrong?
Yeah.
Right.
And that we deserve to be talked to like that. And I feel like in so many of our spaces, particularly Kara, as you talk about in publishing, and Aisha, I want you to talk a little bit more about what you've been doing with leadership and team development in the corporate world, where that type of transactional leadership is the norm, and how it triggers, how it divides, how it subjugates the same people all of the time. And so I just wanted to share that with you guys. I forgot last week we had so much fun. I didn't even think about bringing it up.
Yeah.
But
that's traumatizing though.
Right.
I think my video went away. I don't know why.
It did. Yeah.
But my husband was trying to call me like, sir.
It did.
But that's traumatizing. I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that definitely had to be a difficult. No, I was saying that definitely had to be a difficult experience. And I think in regards to when we talk about leadership development and we talk about developing ourselves as leaders, one of the things I think is important because we think about making this mass change, right, which is extremely important. But I think as leaders, we really need to consider ourselves first. I always look back at myself and look at, okay, what can I do that I can change my household, where I can, touch my kids, and when they go out to the world, they can touch more people, and those people can touch the other person. So just like talking about implicit bias or unconscious bias, the first step, as I've been telling leaders, is that to really reflect on themselves and look at themselves and ask yourself, okay, when it comes to stereotypes, what am I seeing? What am I consuming? What am I that could be shaping how I view other people, because what we don't realize is that stereotypes a lot of times are those like inserts of information that we're getting from media, that we're getting from our first teachers, which might be our parents, that we're getting from things we're consuming, that is just dropping things in our mindset, which unfortunately is where unconscious bias, implicit bias comes from. So we sometimes have to go back and say, okay, what am I watching? What am I consuming? What kind of conversation are me and my friends having? What kind of development did I get from my parents for me to understand this group of people? And then once you get there, you think about unconscious bias. It's kind of like working on unlearning that information. It's now, okay, I know that for me as a military member, I've never been around this much diversity, right? And I'm one of those people that ask questions. Hey, tell me about that. But a lot of people don't allow themselves, when they are in diverse spaces, to build the relationships enough to have those conversations. Because as we talk about empathy, I think the best way to build empathy is to build relationships. So when you do have opportunities, especially in the leadership realm, where you can connect with your team members, start to understand them, then you can ask those questions and you can connect and say, hey, can you talk to me about this? Let me understand it. That's why Kara was she could pick up the phone and call you, because you guys built a relationship. So ask yourself, what kind of spaces and places are you putting yourself so you can truly learn about that culture, about those people, versus what you're seeing on TV or what you learned from the people you are around, because that information might be incorrect. Just like Amber was talking about the algorithms and the things that we're consuming, or, from Google, the blessing is going back to school has allowed me to start learning the value of sources, right? When you write a paper and you submit it, right? They're like, let's check your sources. Make sure it's an APA format. Make sure it's valid. And now I went through a class where it was breaking down like, okay, is it valid? As you're reading this news article, is there a bias? Are they even, is there data? And is that data actually effective? Is that leaning to that bias? And a lot of us don't think about going through the process of really uncovering our sources and not just looking at it from the media, but is your friend a good source? Mm-hmm. Was your mother or your father a good source? And yes, bless their hearts, but they might have not been a good source because they were teaching you from that one-sided experience or from their unconscious bias. So I think it starts with us really working on the stereotypes and what we're consuming from friends, media, from family, and really starting to unlearn that and get connected with people that are next to us so we can build relationships and unlearn that information so we can truly understand the experiences of others.
I think that's so important. And Amber, I want you to jump in here because I saw something on the Nap Ministry. Have you guys ever followed the Nap Ministry?
Oh yeah, honey. I'm a disciple. I believe in naps.
Because naps are, come on, Amber, a form of resistance.
They are. Naps and self-care are a form of resistance, for real.
Yeah, I love it. And I am embracing it.
Yeah.
So there was a post today from the Nap Ministry about predominantly white organizations having these donation parties or events to send money to them. And they're like, you didn't have a conversation with us to know whether we need a donation or do we want your donation? Mm-hmm. And so to go back to what you were saying about building relationship, Aisha, and how that is important. And Carrie, you can jump in after Amber. I think when we talk about implicit bias, it's that, how can I say this? It's that condescending attitude that I need to help you rather than seeing that this is a relational thing and we're here to make you better. You can make us better, that it's reciprocity, that it's asset-based equity, meaning there's something that I hold that you also need, rather than I am here to fix this racism thing. Look at me. Mm-hmm. And I feel like a lot of even the situation with the NFL is reactionary in a way, in that Colin Kaepernick has said it, has been consistent, and has his job back, even though you made the apology.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And the revolution has to be a partnership. Right. Revolution is when people say we're going to build something new together. And it's not just Black folks who are rebuilding it. It's Black folks, it's white folks, it's Latinos, it's, our Asian, it's, Pacific, all these people, who make up the world and who have been, in some way or another been influenced by either white supremacy or their own bias that comes out of their own, national experiences, right? The revolution is everyone saying, how have we all either benefited from bias or supremacy or privilege, whatever you want to call it, right? How have we all benefited from it? How can we all tear it down together to build something new? And you don't do that, as you say, by just throwing money at someone. You ask them, what do you need? How can I show up for you? What do you need me to lobby for you for, right? What bills, what policies are you trying to get backing on that hasn't gained any traction yet because you don't have enough support, right? So we're not talking about a quick, money is a quick fix. Money solves things, but it's a quick fix, right? We're talking about, again, deep-rooted systemic things that require multiple voices amplifying them and again, working together to tear them down. So, yeah, I mean, all these corporations that, are so pro-Black Lives Matter all of a sudden, it's capitalism, right? And I posted last night on Facebook, I said, when has Blackness never not been profitable, right?
Say it louder for the people in the back.
Yeah, when has Blackness, the profitability of Blackness is what modernized this world, right? Because without Black bodies and Black labor, you would not have America as we know it today, right? And so everything that corporations do, in my opinion, are in that same tradition of monetizing and capitalizing off Black pain, Black bodies, Black struggles, Black stories, Blackness, period, right? And
hearts and the love, they are loving that. Say it one more time. Go ahead, give Amber some hearts and love for that. That was
I mean, like, capitalism is such an evil. It is such an evil. And you act as though you're so moral and you're taking a high ground. And like Kara said, it's all performative. It's a look at me. It's a race to see who can support Black folks, or Black Lives Matter the fastest, when in your everyday walk, do you support Black lives, right? Do you speak? Do you say hello? Do you lock your door when you see me? Do you hire me? And not just hire me, but do you put me in a position where I'm more than just, a chief diversity officer?
Oh, that is so true. I'm sorry, but that's so important. I appreciate it. So my someone in my leadership, which I really appreciated, our head lead, he's like the executive leader in the military. He sent an email, just kind of saying, okay, this is not what we're standing for, right? And he's like, I'm open for feedback. So I sent an email and I was just like, listen, because we were in the hiring process, we're looking for someone that's going to be a division leader within our organization. And I said, although that we're having this conversation, the reality is when you look up the chain, it is covered by white men. So within, if you look at the section or the part of your organization that you're hiring for, we're diverse, we're all women, and we're all minorities. So the question was, as you're having this hiring panel, would you please invite someone that represents us into the room? Yeah. I appreciate it because they acted right away. But the blessing about the individual, she is an officer, and it just has to be a dynamic because they're hiring another officer. And it was a Black woman. But I loved when I talked to her, she said, but what you won't make me, when it came to the interview question, she was like, I won't be like your diversity person. You need to be the person to ask the diversity question. You need to be the person to ask this because they're going to expect it from me. They're going to be looking for the Black woman or the Black man to be like, so what are your thoughts on diversity? No, she said, don't use me as the puppet. Whenever there's a diversity training, don't automatically navigate to me. I don't want to be the face of it. I need you to be, because I want you to advocate so you can really influence change. So I just loved how you highlighted that. Like, I don't want to be a puppet. I want to be the person that you're not highlighting or put it into this role. What are you going to do to do your homework? And then what are you going to do to put that information out there?
And what will you also do?
Hashtag do your homework.
Do your homework.
Do your homework.
Can I add, Nathalie, like, what will you also do to empower my community as well? So the critique of the NFL right now is that they, recruit and draft all these Black kids from inner cities, from poverty, right? and they do nothing to affect change in those communities that they recruit these guys from. And so when it comes time to speak out against racism and whatnot, you have no vested interest in it, because all you're doing is capitalizing off of the athlete. You're not trying to invest in their communities that they come from, that are producing more of them, right? So I mean, it's not out of their character, to not speak out. But yeah, don't make, going back to the other point, don't make me your token, because I can't speak. Aisha, you just said that you were West African and that you have a different experience than Black Americans. So it would be disrespectful to you and to me and to everyone else to expect that because you're darker in skin tone that you speak for the experience. No one person does, number one. Number two, there are a multiplicity of experiences even behind Black skin. We don't all come from the same place, right? Nathalie is Caribbean from New York. You're West African, you moved to Virginia. I'm from Mississippi, right? I mean, the seat of oppression in this country. So yeah, part of doing your homework is knowing that there is no one way to be Black. Blackness is not, monolithic.
There you go. I love that. I love that. And I think that's so important, because I've had conversations with Black Americans and they're like, even the church experience. My father, I have so many different biases, because again, I have the African experience. My father is Muslim. I'm an immigrant. So there's so many causes and issues that have happened, maybe even in the political realm, that I can connect to. But people assume, they're like, what, you don't know this church song? I don't. This is my first experience with Christ. Like, I learned about Christ. Yes, my church might be predominantly white, but I was introduced to church. It wasn't within my family. Yes, I could be following, I could be Muslim right now, but I chose to go the Christian way. So my experience is different. But a lot of people be like, girl, you ain't Black. And I'm like, I'm African, like I'm new to this experience, So I love how you highlighted, like, there's no one way to be Black. I mean, my skin tone looks this way. However, my experience is different. So even as us, we have to educate ourselves to understand the different experiences of people who have the same skin tone, but different experiences. I love that.
And can I also, one last thing, and then I'm gonna let Nathalie take over again. This is your show.
Oh, no.
But you said
we don't lead in that way. We don't lead in that way, Amber. We are curating this space together.
Exactly.
Go ahead, sister.
Exactly. So Black, as I mentioned last week, right? Black is not a signifier of, some biological distinction, right? Black is a construct. It is an idea. It is something that was created, again, to justify chattel slavery. Right. So of course, then with that working definition in mind, that Blackness is something that the idea of Blackness is something that was created to justify the enslavement of those stolen from West Africa and brought, throughout the diaspora. Right. With that in mind, of course, then you are African, because your people, were not brought through the Middle Passage. Right. And so, again, that's part of doing your homework, is knowing that just because someone has brown skin, they don't have the same experience because they don't have the same historical experience. And so the ways in which we racialize people, number one, is faulty in itself. But again, we have to unpack, the conception and the impetus, right, of these racialized conceptions, right? And so, so when someone says you ain't Black, I'm not offended. You shouldn't be offended, because it's like, yeah, I'm African. Like, I don't have the same experience as you do, and I don't think we've quite gotten there yet, because we're so used to protecting our Blackness and proving our Blackness, right, that we don't even know what Blackness is all the way.
Right.
Yes, I love it.
Sarah's in the comment section. She said, so right. There's more than one way to be Black. 3 hands.
Sarah.
Yes.
Go ahead, Kara. Jump in.
I don't even know where to jump in. I'm taking notes. I guess I want to say one thing about attention that I feel as more and more white folks want to be anti-racist. Let's give folks the benefit of the doubt. As we on social media are starting to decenter ourselves, the people that I'm following, the people that I recommended last week, like Rachel Cargill and Layla Facade, they've gotten like 90,000 new followers. People who are not as serious about the work as the original 10,000 that they had, right? So now they've that they're.
Did we lose her?
Can you still hear me?
Yeah. Now, okay. Now you're back in.
So they have all these people in their comments, in their DMs, that they're trying to educate. So it's like, I feel like I did a good thing by decentering myself and sending people to them. But then what did I do to them? now there's all these. So it's this real tension of like, where is the care? Like, where is the equality? Where am I really being an ally by hoisting all of these folks into their inboxes? So that's one thing that comes up for me is I'm thinking about this, or even to share this conversation on my Facebook page, on my Instagram. Like, how many people am I sending your way? So it's a tension I feel just in the midst of this. And I think so many thoughts in my head. A lot, kind of a mantra now is like, for me, is like, listen, learn, lament, and leverage. Listen, learn, lament, and leverage. But we get arrested in one of those places, right? So I think there's a lot of people, a lot of white folks who are saying, I want to listen. But the bias is if they don't get the answer back, they're like, oh, but not that.
It's probably the expectation behind it. You know, I think sometimes, like I tell a lot of people, when, you know, maybe from the, you know, the white experience or what they're experiencing, the first thing they want to do is insert themselves and say, I'm not the racist. And it's like, it has nothing to do with, it's like they automatically go to them. I have to prove I'm not the racist. I have to prove it. I have to prove it. But it's like, that's not what people are necessarily saying. They're not saying it's about you. It's a deeper issue than that. So even when I have had someone come to me and was like, listen, I tried, I didn't get the response I wanted. You might run into some individuals and they might be hesitant. They might not want to talk to you. And I always go back and ask you, well, first off, did you even build a relationship with them before? Because you can't expect that Shaquita down the hall, just saying that as a name, that might not be her name, but even if it's Helen down the hall that happens to be African American, you never took time to learn about her, and then you're going to go to her, hey Helen, good morning, can you tell me about how this is making you feel? We've never built that relationship. So even for her, me and her, no, right? But me and her, we built a relationship. I was like, girl, you should have came to me first. We went to military trips together. And what I did, I gave her some, hey, educate yourself. Before she's like, I want to talk. I want to learn. And I was like, before you can talk, before we learn, here are 5 resources. Here's some Netflix documentaries that you can watch. Here's some things you can read. Once you do that, then let's talk and have the dialogue first. So I think that what you're doing, like, you're doing the best you can. I really appreciate the fact that you're doing that. But sometimes there's so many resources, and the blessing is that there's so many resources. I know, Nathalie, that's one of the things you wanted to share later, that people can go to, educate yourself. Then I'm pretty sure a lot of those resources are going to answer most of your questions. So it's not just one person that you're like, let me go to my Black friend and call them right now and find out what I can do. Where a lot of these issues are systematic, and you have to recognize it's a lot deeper. Tell me everything you know. Like, if someone calls me, I'm gonna be like, well, because again,
my
they look
invoice is
my skin color and be like, what's the Black American experience? I can give you about the African experience and then tell you about the experience I had, but I don't even feel comfortable having that conversation with them. So it's like, there's so many resources and things you can do out there. But again, you're doing the best you can do in this, in this process. So that's why education is continuous. It shouldn't be just because Helen down the hall shuts you down, it doesn't mean that you give up. Continue to try to search and make some changes within yourself first, then put it out there. But don't look for people to be the puppets or the ones that's going to answer all of your question, because it's but so much in capacity that we have if you're not going to take time and do your own homework.
Yeah, and I think that speaks so much to, Kara, you and I kind of talked about it earlier today when we talked about how exhausting this work is. Do you mind if I share a little bit of our conversation today?
I'm an open book. Go ahead.
So I was like, Kara, how are you doing? She's like, I'm exhausted. I was like, the muscle memory will kick in. You'll get used to it.
Yes. I told Nathalie there was a meme or, something on Instagram, and it was like, hey, white people, you're not used to doing this all day, every day. Like, we live this all day, every day, and you're not used to it. So take a nap, But that's, but then white guilt kicks in. Like, I can't. I have 400 years of this to make up for. I can't nap. Like, so it yeah.
Yeah. And I love that you're transparent about it, because again, if that is not your normal, it will be very hard to understand, particularly the plight of the Black woman, right?
Yeah, for sure. That's why I say Morrison is so great, because she centers, without apology, she and Butler center Black women, right? And say that we have a very unique experience that cannot go ignored,
Mm-hmm. And the saying is, if you want something done, who do you hire?
You listen, a Black woman. And at the same time, that also goes into my other favorite, Zora Neale Hurston. Black women, the nigga woman, she says, are the mules of the world, right? So while it's great to hire a Black woman to learn what you would not have learned otherwise, you are still putting that burden and that pressure on her to teach you what you did not know otherwise, right? So you're doing
and paying her half the salary to do so.
That is correct. That is absolutely correct. And I wonder, Aisha, why the response, that you said someone, offered was, I didn't get the response that I was looking for, a white person. What were you looking for? Like, were you looking for someone to make you feel, or to affirm that you weren't racist? You're looking for someone to not challenge you. You're looking for someone to not uncover your implicit bias. Like, what are you looking for when you say,
you're looking for someone to congratulate you for making the first performative gesture?
Yeah.
But I think it's, like the rich ruler who came to Jesus and said, what do I do? And Jesus says, here's what you do. And they're like, oh, no, not that.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, and she was really bothered by that experience. And I understood her side, because again, I think that she was looking at it from the lens like, look, I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to show you that I'm here for you. And sometimes but you have to take it. I agree. Just like take yourself out of it. And it's going to be hard, because a part of you is going to put yourself into it and saying, I have to prove I'm not racist. It's going to always be about but I need you to look at the bigger picture of what you need to do to affect change in your household, in your workplace, and within your friendships. You need to identify your circles. And I think that awareness for a lot of people is hard. It's like, now you're really looking at yourself and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose friendships from this. I might not. It's the fear of all the things that they think they might lose in this process. And it is scary. It is scary to go through this process, I'm sure. But I think that's what people put themselves into it, and they're not thinking about making the big impact. It's about, how is this going to affect me? But you need to think about how this can affect we.
Yeah. And
no, go ahead, Amber.
If you're so focused on how it's going to affect you, then you're not helping anything. Like, you're not helping the cause. We're talking about, a deep rooted history that permeates, again, so many systems, and you censoring yourself and making yourself the victim. What will I lose? What friends will I lose? What job will I lose? My reputation, right? Like, who gives a damn? I mean, we're talking about saving people's lives, literally, right? So if you're gonna lose 2 friends to save someone's life or the lives of Black folk, then so be it. We lose our jobs every day. We don't even get hired most times because of our skin, right? We can't even get started. When I hear things like that, I'm like, you're aware many of us want to be, right? And we can't even get started. So yeah, boo-hoo, lady who came to you.
I want to ask Kara that. Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to ask Kara that, like, how does that feel for you? How does it feel for you? Like, have you had those moments where you've been like, man, I want to make sure that I prove that I'm here and I understand. And have you had those feelings and those battles and how this might affect your relationships and how you might look in your community? Like, have you had those? I mean, if you feel comfortable, share.
I mean, even just a couple weeks ago, like I started texting my Black friends, make sure everything's okay. And
why would you do this?
I'm in it.
I didn't even say that. I looked down for a second.
But one of my friends,
at least, Kara, you didn't say I texted my one Black friend.
Right.
Thank God for that.
Hallelujah.
But one of my friends texted me back and he said, "You have a platform that I could not imagine, and I expect you to use it."
Yep.
And I was like, that was not the "thanks, Kara, for checking in on me" response that I was expecting. That was a holding my feet to the fire response. And also, my brother is a white police officer in California. So the things that I am posting, I don't know if my nieces and actually, they've had to delete all of their social media accounts because their personal information is being leaked.
Oh, wow.
So because he is a police officer. And so, but before all their social media accounts were deleted, I was like, I am posting things defunding the police.
I'm with it.
That are going to hurt my family.
Yeah.
He's out there. He was on alert. He was out there working 12-hour days. So yeah, I mean,
can we, I wasn't expecting for us to have this conversation, but I think it's important that we have this conversation because I think when people hear defund the police, they think get rid of all police and the world is going to be chaotic. And those communities who are over policed anyway are going to, blow the world up.
Self-destruct, yeah.
And set the world on fire. Yeah. Can we put some parameters around what we're saying, particularly in the context of asset-based equity, when we say defund the police? And Amber, I'm going to throw it to you, what that means.
Yeah, we're talking about reallocating resources, right? We're talking about cities that really are police cities, because more funds are given to the police department than they are anything else. Then they're given to public schools, then they're given to daycares, then they're given to hospitals and in healthcare systems.
After school programs, the arts
programs, right?
Transit,
PBS. Can we give
transit?
Can we give Sesame Street some more money? I mean, come on, I miss the music.
Right. I mean, community development, infrastructure, right? America has some of the worst roads, I live in Atlanta, right? I mean, there are potholes everywhere, and that could be, alleviated if, again, so for example, our mayor right now, there is a proposed budget of $227 million, I think, for the police department. And it's so one-sided, that much money proposed for the police department. It increases. It's been increasing, every year under her leadership. But when it comes to, again, community development, there's almost no money, which is sad to me because Atlanta ranks #1 and has for the past 6 or 7 years in wealth inequality and income inequality. Right? If you are Black and poor, if you're Black, poor, and from Atlanta, you have a 4% chance of coming out of poverty. Right. But at the same time, we invest this much money in the police department. And so defund the police means that it means a couple of things. Number one, it means to reallocate monies towards, the people, to invest in people. So therefore you don't have to over police them. Number one. Number two, I think it also means to reimagine how we serve and protect communities. Do you have to have someone carrying a gun and a knife stick to police your community,
or in a school? Is it really necessary to have police in elementary?
Exactly. So Minneapolis actually ended their contract with the police department there in the public school system because they see, okay, y'all are violent, and you have so much implicit bias that we can't trust you around these kids, right?
And not only that, that really also adds to the whole school to prison pipeline. I mean, when I did my, I did some research on that, but that a lot of times is the first interaction with the police some kids have. And of course, when you do have, unfortunately, that unconscious bias that officer might come in, or even when you have certain schools who have these high suspension rates, now these children are missing school. So when they return, they can't catch up. Now they end up maybe out of school less often, and now they're connecting with people maybe in the neighborhood that might not be the best. And it's just like a trickle effect where now they end up in a police station. Now they are in the juvenile justice system, and now it's like a trickle effect. So I think that's the other aspect of it as well, is utilizing other ways and putting funds towards within schools instead of using suspensions all the time. Why don't we utilize some of these, the PBIS method, the SEL process, restorative justice, and let's really fund those processes so we can really find out or find alternatives rather than suspending students and then bring them into the school. Like I mentored young boys, and which was a very extreme experience for me, because as a woman, especially a Black woman, I was like, I can't mentor Black boys. They need Black men. But what I realized in that process, that I was being a good, a lot of the Black women that were around, we too can be an example, maybe different from what they were used to seeing. And in that school, I had one of those mentees end up in, kicked out of school because of that exact thing. They had what they called a race war. And so one of our mentoring sessions was allowing them to understand the school to prison pipeline. And I'm like, you guys are saying Mexicans against the Blacks, but don't you realize the prison population is full of Mexicans and Blacks? The Hispanic community and the Black community, you guys are fighting against each other instead of realizing that you guys need to come together. But they don't understand that these
because you have a common enemy.
Exactly, but these were middle school boys. They didn't understand. They just thought this was fighting, So it was like, so when you guys talk about allocating resources, I think that, again, when we talk about defunding the police, it is that reallocation, because we have to realize that in this process, there's going to be an economic process that money is going to be so important. So we do have to look at the economics of it, the financing of it, to figure out how can we allocate resources elsewhere. Look at the data, look at the history, look at the benefits of restorative justice. And now let's allocate funds into this versus, like Nathalie was saying, the over policing of some communities. So look at it from that big scope.
And understanding that in shifting those funds and having that asset-based equity, you will see a decrease in crime, because crime is when you see violence, whether it's a Black community, whether it's a white community, it tends to be more Black because of the economic disenfranchisement. And so when you take resources away from communities that are also already marginalized and you put them into organizations, and I'll say fraternities in some instance, because all police officers are not like that, but the FBI has information that there are a lot of police departments that are known KKK members.
Yes, for sure, especially in the South.
And I'm not making it up. Google it. FBI.
No, you're right.
And so if you are funding these fraternities, and again, I'm not talking about all police officers, I'm talking about particular police officers that have made their stand on where they are, and you are funding them and taking those resources out of communities and then putting them in jail and making more money off of them. We can't expect different results.
And do you even want different results? And let us also add that one thing that defunding the police amplifies is the need for mental health services, right?
Yes.
A lot of people who we arrest, need mental health intervention. A lot of folks you see, for example, who are homeless or committing crimes and whatnot, they have mental health issues that have not been treated. So what do? We throw them in jail and we profit off of them, in certain prisons, right? So again, my question is, do we even want to change the paradigm, or are we comfortable because we know that we are, number one, you're profiting off of people in these jails and prisons, right? I mean, the first thing Atlanta did when the Olympics came in 96 was build a jail, a detention center, you know, and shuttle away homeless folks off the street to create this image of Atlanta that is so prosperous, right? When really, you have most of its Black residents who are from here, who are born here, who live well below the poverty line, right? So do we want to even invest in people? It's the question, and that question implies that you have to see my humanity. Like, you have to see me as a human, as your equal. To invest in me, you have to see that I am a human just like you. And unfortunately, our Constitution, you know, has yet to humanize fully Black people in this country. So everything we do, you know, stems from the idea that we're not human.
Yeah, and I think so. There's 2 comments. Ooh, they're going off in the comment section. Okay,
come on, go
Marilyn says people have addiction issues, and I think Amber, I don't know if you remember this, way back in seminary. I sound old now. We were talking about
back in the day when I was young and not a kid anymore.
Sometimes I wish I was a kid again.
Yeah, exactly.
But in seminary, we were talking about, I don't know if you remember this conversation. I don't even know where we were, but we were talking about that passage of the young boy who was possessed by a demon. And understanding that mental health issue was a reflection of societal, the cultural, and the oppression that he was experiencing in the Greco-Roman time period.
Yeah, we were talking about chapter 5.
Very similar, Kara, to those feelings of exhaustion, of PTSD, of trauma that happens when you are living in these environments.
Right. Yep. That was Mark chapter 5. The demon possessed man. Yeah.
And so from those things, you see the addiction issues. You see the lack of access to healthcare. You see the lack of access to therapy. Because again, where does that lead us to?
Yeah, people are addicted to drugs because a lot of times they're trying to cope with what they see every day, right? I mean, my husband teaches in an inner city school, right, in Atlanta, and he always talks about how these kids, they come to him and he's like, Amber, they have almost no chance because of what they see every day, because they come into this world already, you know, on drugs because their mother used drugs, right? Because their father, you know, sells drugs. That's all they know is that. All they know is violence. So again, what do you expect? How do you expect kids to act, even in class, around other kids, when that's their everyday reality? That they're gonna have some PTSD. They're gonna have some mental health issues. And again, unless we invest, you're gonna have a bigger trauma situation from Native Son.
And you know what? And even when you bring that up, like my son, he's overcoming ADHD, and before I even considered doing it, because you know, mental health and getting that support was such it was just such a taboo thing to talk about. Also, you have heard how PTSD medication has been used as, it's like a hustle. We have to consider that we have to also find out ways to take these funds and look into other means versus medication, because even for my son, he was getting kicked out of school. I struggled because I knew that there were some schools that were targeting African-American boys, targeting African-American girls, treating them differently. So for a while, I was just like, nothing wrong with him. Y'all are just saying that because he's the only Black kid in class, until I educated myself and I understood what it was. I got to understand and really look at the patterns and pay attention to the process and actually figure out, okay, how I'm going to help him. But I had a fear in me because you hear all these horror stories of how, you know, medicine has been utilized as a way to, you know, hustle the community. Let's give them some drugs and allow them to handle it in that way.
And
so I think that exactly. So I think there's so many. Yeah, we've heard about yoga, we've heard about meditation and how schools have incorporated this and how it's been so beneficial. So, you know, again, when we think about economics and funding and money, thinking about ways to allocate that money for other resources, because healthcare is another aspect. So you have healthcare, you have education, you have so many different layers that requires a shaking up and a reallocation. So when you people say defund, I guess, I don't know if that's necessary. I wouldn't even say it's the wrong word to use. It's kind of like reallocate, because there's so many layers to what needs to change to help the African-American community, the Black community, a lot of these communities, by this reallocation that needs to start happening.
We're losing you.
Are you losing me? Can you hear me?
I do think it is reallocation. I think defund, but I did catch the last part of what you said. I think it is about reallocation and not just saying we're getting rid of the police department, and understanding to your point, Amber, that in reallocating, we are not dehumanizing. We are understanding that it is an investment in a better community, or more just community, a more equitable society for people to live in. And Karen, there's a question, a statement in the comments for you. And guys, if you have anything to say, you have any questions at all, go ahead and drop them in the comment section right now before we end. We're gonna definitely bring your voices in the room. And so this is from Latoya from Florida. Shout out to Latoya from Florida. Kara, can we get some of those 90,000 people to silently protest and stop shopping at stores that spread the bias? That could help a lot. Well, I mean, Kara, you got the pull here because you got people 10,000 followers in one day.
They're not following me, but I'll call them.
I want to ask you and Amber, of course, a question, because it's like I empathize with Kara, right? Well, I think we lost Nathalie, but even for you, Amber, like, what do you think that if you do, like, like, say if you have Karen, Karen, she's so overwhelmed. What do you say or speak to in relation to having to support or guide our white allies or Caucasian allies in this process, because their world is being shaken up as well? So what is your view in supporting them? Because you have some people like, who cares? Kara can cry all she wants. She could say she's overwhelmed. I've been overwhelmed all my life. All my life I had to fight. So forget that she's stressed out. Yes, I'm glad her things are crumbling down. But again, like, how do you feel on the aspect on the other side of empathizing with maybe someone that wants to come along and
Aisha, I can't hear a word you say, girl. I
need
you to hear me down there.
Amber and Karen.
I can hear you.
That's Nathalie. Nathalie on the Wi-Fi. But no, like, what would you say to support her, or what is your perspective on it? Because some people might be like,
what happened? Can you guys hear me?
Oh no, she went away. No, we can hear you, but I think it was something wrong with your sound, maybe, Nathalie. But to answer Aisha's question, though, how do I support someone like Karen who really wants to be an ally and learn? I would say if you are really like Karen, if you really are true to being an ally, if you really are true to learning, right, then I have no problem with supporting you. But if you're reaching out to me, as a performative gesture, or to make yourself feel better and to prove to yourself that you're not racist, I have no interest in that, right? I have no interest in proving to you, what you don't want to be. No, either you want to be in this fight to dismantle white supremacy or not. And so again, someone like Karen, some of my other friends, right, who I know are true to the fight, I have no problem, with supporting them, because they show up. Right? They listen, they empathize, they do the work. They recognize, their privilege in this system, and they recognize that they're going to have to give up something so that, we can all progress, together. Right? So on one hand, I support you if you are a true ally. If you are not, and I can tell that you're just reaching out to me to make yourself feel better, and whatever, I can't support that. I hope that makes sense.
No, it does. Yeah. Nathalie, you good over there?
Yeah, she having a hard time.
I think I'm good.
Can you hear me now?
I'm like, what?
No, it's you.
So my son is right outside my door, and I'm assuming Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Can you hear me? Because it seemed like it was me and you here.
Okay, so my son is right outside my door.
She can't hear me now.
I can hear you.
Okay.
Oh.
So my son's right outside my door, and I'm praying that he doesn't like knock the door down. I can hear his devices slowing my internet down, and I'm just like,
That's hilarious.
praying we get
Hilarious.
praying we get through this.
Can I think one thing that has been,
but let's do.
Kara was saying something, Nathalie.
Let's do our last nuggets for.
That was what we were gonna say.
Well, there we go. Kara starts with the last nugget.
Yeah.
Oh, Nathalie, this is so sad.
So, listen, the kids, they sabotage things sometimes.
That's right.
Mine are upstairs, so I'm lucky right now.
Oh, she just put herself on mute. She's just done.
Yeah.
Well, you're lucky, Aisha, because they're also.
Oh no!
Oh God. Okay.
Come through, Kara.
Yeah, come through, Kara. What were you gonna say?
Well, I was going to say there is some freedom in knowing and just claiming that there's racism in me. And I just have to examine it every day and just to name it and not try to defend it. And I've had so many Black colleagues, friends say, I don't trust white people. Like, and just to be real about it. And I just have to
understand where that comes from.
Yeah. And some of the reaction is not personal. It's because of this skin I'm in. I'm not trustworthy. And that has just helped me release a lot and keep doing the work. Like, those are some of the things I live with because of the skin I'm in, the same way you live with some of the things because of the skin you're in. And I just to release it and try and be faithful every day. I mean, and ask for a lot of grace and apologize a lot.
Yeah, I'm with it.
Oh, she's gone again.
You're muted, actually.
I think I'm good now.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, your screen looks great. Yes.
We got the little boy away. All right. Sarah says that's really good, Kara. And I didn't hear it, but I concur.
I said Nathalie Nelson Parker is amazing. That's what I said.
Wow. First of all, I am so lucky to have you guys in my life. That's number one. Like that I can be the person that I am because I am surrounded by amazing women, mothers, friends, world changers like you. So I really appreciate it. Marilyn said in the comment section that she would love to hear some perspective from people like Judge Sheila Calloway of the Juvenile Court, who's based here in Nashville, and Rashida Ra Frizzy from Gideon's Army. So I'll be getting in contact with you, Marilyn, to make the connection.
Dope.
That's really dope. Let me see who else is in the comment section. If you guys have any comments, questions, go ahead and put them in at this time. And let's do some final nuggets. Let's start with
Kara already had hers.
Oh,
can I do one plug? Because I promised a friend I would. This is a chapbook by Sienna Rouse. It is called Vanta Black. And it was published by Third Man Records here in Nashville. And she is another one in the line of Toni Morrison, who is not worried about the white gaze and writes beautiful, beautiful poetry and has really single-handedly revolutionized the poetry scene in Nashville. Sienna Rouse, Vanta Black.
Wow.
And that's poetry?
Poetry.
I'm going to have to get that.
I love that.
I love it.
Sarah said you ladies did a wonderful job tonight. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah.
And we appreciate you've hung out with us all night, ladies' night. Please continue to like, share, comment, invite your friends. We'll be back. Not next week, but we will be back. We need a nap. We need to rest.
Nap ministry.
We need to come back and rejuvenate ourselves so that we can continue to share this amazing content. All right, go ahead. Aisha, your last nugget of the night.
Oh, well, like I said, it all starts with self-reflection. So again, as leaders, I believe we're leaders at home. We're leaders in the workspaces. Really do that deep dive. And again, look at what kind of stereotypical information that you're consuming from media. Like I said, there might be some uneducation that you need to do because of things that you learned over time, maybe from the household as well. And start to make sure that you're building relationships so you can learn to empathize and understand people who might not look like you. But you cannot expect to connect with someone that you never connected with before if you don't get to know them. But please utilize the time, educate yourself, really do a deep dive of you first, work on yourself, look yourself in the mirror, and recognize that on this journey, as you're doing that, now start impacting change and taking action to start saying no to this, yes to this, and really start focusing on giving people a seat at your tables. Make sure you do that. That equity is so important because we have a lot of spaces where people don't get a seat at the table. So how can you ever build a relationship with somebody that you don't even open up the door for? So let's open up more doors, but start with self-reflection first.
You better preach.
Yeah.
You better
open
preach,
up the
Aisha.
doors. Let the chair open so they can have a seat at the table and build relationships. I love it. I love it. That's the only way to recognize your implicit bias and to create new spaces that are more equitable and just. Amber Lowe Woodfurk.
Yep, I would say my last nugget. Sometimes you may have to tear down those tables because those tables never even meant to serve those of us, who unfortunately, because of our race, class, or gender, ethnicity, are marginalized, right? So that's number one. And number two, I would say to everyone watching to really, really interrogate whether or not you're committed to this fight, right? So I had a conversation on Tuesday with a friend of mine on my Facebook Live, my Bible study that I do every other Tuesday, right? And I told him, I said, I was in my car one day last week after I had left a protest. I think I was leaving a protest or going to a protest one. And I had to ask myself, when we say things like burn it all down or start over, right? Am I really understanding what that means? And am I committed to starting over if need be? And starting over, that means that I may lose again what I've gained, my privilege, whatever, right? My things I may lose in the process of building a new table, building something new. So I would say to leave everyone with, I would say to really interrogate whether or not you're committed to this fight. And if you're not, just say you're not, and if you're not, I would want you to be. Right. Of course, we want you to be, but at the same time, you have to be all in because we don't know what's next. Again, we are in an international uprising right now, all across this globe. We don't know what the world's going to look like next because people are legit burning it all down, whether it be police departments, whether it be just the whole idea, again, of white supremacy and whiteness itself is being picked apart right now in every facet of our societies. So gauge your commitment level. And if you're not all the way there, pray about it. Talk to some friends.
Take it to the Lord.
Take it to the Lord. Do some education. But if you all in, or if you say you're all in, check yourself and say, am I really willing to lose? No matter if you're black, white, whatever, we're all going to lose something. So be willing to lose something in this fight for a more just and equitable society.
Definitely. I love it. I love it. And understanding, and this will be my last nugget, that it starts with you.
That's correct.
The transformation that the world needs, the change that the world needs has to start with you. And whatever that looks like, whether that's marching, whether that's writing, whether that's leading organizations, whether that's preaching and being, I'm pointing to you guys,
In our Brady Bunch squares.
In our Brady Bunch squares, right? Whether that's preaching and being an academician and using your scholarly mind to hold people accountable to a more just society, it has to start with us. We have to lead ourselves well to know, where do I fit in on this fight? And I love what you said, Amber. If you're not, just say you're not and get out the way, because the revolution is televised. It's on social media. It's on Twitter. This is going to be a time where things are going to change. Change has to happen. And it's not a situation where we can wait anymore. It's been 400 years plus. There is no more waiting. Society can no longer exist the way it has, and it won't. It won't. And I think we all need to be comfortable also with embracing this level of resistance, with embracing this tenacity, this momentum in history, because the moment that we let up, the moment that we stop resisting, the moment we stop calling out privilege, the moment that we stop convening in ways that decenters whiteness and the moment we stop doing those things, we cease to build the kind of community and environment and society and world that is just and representative of God's beloved community. And it has to start with you, wherever you are, whether you're in Florida, whether you're in Jamaica, whether you're in Africa. I have a lot of people that follow me in Africa for some reason. Whoever and wherever you are, as long as you are a part of this platform and a part of the world changers that are in this particular movement, I want you to know it starts with you, and the ever way that you choose to make a difference, please commit to it and know that we're here and we're resourcing you and we're supporting you and we're praying with you. And this is the last thing I want to share with you guys. And I just want to share it because I want to see if you're experiencing this too. For the last couple of days, my husband and I have, and Amber, you know, I can fall asleep anywhere, anytime.
Anywhere. That is correct.
Getting my rest is not a problem. I'm talking about good sleep.
Snoring. In public.
In public.
In public. No, all out in public snoring.
I don't mind. Aisha, you might know this too, because we've traveled a lot together. One time, Aisha was locked out the room. She's like, "Girl, I called the phone 100 times."
Listen, I was out like, I'm gonna have to sleep by the door.
By the door.
By the door.
That's hilarious.
I too am a disciple of the Nap Ministry.
Yeah.
So sleep is not an issue for me. But I've noticed Leon and I have been just getting up multiple times throughout the night, and we just automatically go into prayer. We could feel something is happening, something is different, something is shifting. And I just pray for all of you world changers out there, for all of you who are committed to justice, committed to equity, that you know that this is different.
Yeah.
And that as you engage this work, you are not alone. The Spirit of the Lord is with you. And the revolution will be televised and social mediaized. And so we have resources for you. Kara shared some, Amber shared some. Aisha, did you share your resources already?
Oh, yes. I mean, I definitely did like a recent training. If you go to my my site, aishathomas.org, or if you go to my page and search for Aisha Thomas, I definitely did a training to really break down the process of undoing that unconscious bias, the power of empathy, and then making team culture changes, and now making organizational culture changes. So definitely go out and check that out, because this is all up in my spirit. And leaders, we have to be able to take the lead and make those changes from the top and trickle that thing on down. All right.
Wow.
You're my new girl crush, Aisha. Oh my God.
I love this. And of course, you can go to NathalieNelsonParker.com. Transformation Starts With Me, Bold Strategies for Innovative Leadership. Also has some resources in the back in regards to why transformational leadership is so important. We will also, if you're a part of my email list, I send show notes. So you'll get direct links to follow Kara, Amber, Aisha, as well as myself. And you'll get all of the resources in one document. So if you're not a part of my email list, go ahead to NathalieNelsonParker.com. Guys, 700 people opened our show notes. And I've gotten great comments. Shout out to, there are a few predominantly white organizations specifically that reached back to me and was like, thank you so much for providing this space, for providing these voices. So I'm so grateful for all of you for the different ways that you participate. And I'm getting mushy because my girls are on the line, but I'm so appreciative that we can share and to touch your life. And let us know. I love to hear the comments. Send me the email if you want to do it privately on how this is impacting you and hopefully your organizations and your communities. That's it. That's all. As my coach will say, says the clock on the wall. We gotta go. We won't be back next week, but I'll let you know when we are.
Love you guys.
Bye.